This is Doreen Benjamin. Today we're having a conversation about the war with Israel, America, and Iran. We have three panelists today that I would like to introduce very briefly. We're going to start with Jonathan York to my right here. Jonathan York is an attorney, artist, speaker, and filmmaker. He runs an investment firm and was previously a Middle East analyst at the US State Department. Just weeks after October 7th, he traveled to Israel, where he produced the documentary Al Tira, Do Not Fear. John earned his BA and law degree from Stanford. Thank you for being with us, John.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, and then to his right, we have Fujan Niman Sakai. She's a proud Iranian Jewish woman, a fierce advocate for human rights, and a global icon of courage whose voice has echoed around the world. She rose to international recognition after a video of her boldly confronting anti-Israel hate by proclaiming Am Yisrael Chai went viral, seen by over 55 million people. That moment sparked a movement, turning Fujan into a symbol of unshakable pride, Jewish resilience, and moral clarity in the face of rising anti-Semitism and global misinformation. As a community leader and activist, Fujan uses her platform to advocate for Israel, amplify the voices of oppressed Iranians, and defend the values of freedom, democracy, and human dignity. Whether hosting fundraisers, lobbying lawmakers, or standing on the front lines of advocacy, she is driven by one clear mission: to ensure the Jewish people are never silenced again and to set a free Iran liberated from the grip of the Islamic Republic. Thank you, Fujan, so much for being here with us. And last but definitely not least, we have Dr. Sheila Nazarian. She does not need a full intro. I can just tell you we have an Emmy-nominated plastic surgeon. She just got off with speaking with Fox News for 4 hours. How long ago was that, Dr. Nazarian?
Last night, ended at midnight.
Ended at midnight, and she's here with us. We're so happy to have all three of you here with us to speak about this. Our goal is to provide some insights about what happened not only in the last 24 hours, but in the past 40 plus years. This is one of the most monumental things that have happened in the last 40 years, especially as it relates to America and Iran. So I think I would love first to hear from all of you, why did you want to be here today to have this conversation?
I think we're living through a moment in history, and I think it's not very often that that happens. On Israel's Independence Day, I was in Tel Aviv screening my film, and I had a conversation with my friend Dr. Michael Oren, the former ambassador of Israel to the United States. And he said, you know, we've been living sort of through a vacation in history. We often think of history as something that happened and is a closed book that we look back on, but this is an extraordinary time. And I think it's important for all of us to understand the context, to have a open discussion about what comes next and what should come next. And I'm happy to be here with all of you to talk about it.
Thank you, Jonathan.
You know, as an Iranian Jewish woman raised here in Los Angeles, I feel like we've been waiting for this moment for over 45 years, where there is a little glimmer of hope for a free and liberated Iran. It's been something that our family, our community has been looking forward to seeing in the past 45 years, and we are looking forward to the future of a free and liberated Iran and bringing peace to the Middle East. And
thank you. And Dr. Nazarian?
Yeah, I echo the sentiments of John in that I really think that we're living in a historic biblical time. And I have teared up more than 2 or 3 times in the last couple days, seeing young girls in Iran tearing up their hijabs in school and chanting, you know, death to the regime and rising up. That made me tear up. Seeing America so boldly help its ally in Judeo-Christian values, Israel, that made me tear up. And like Fujan said, I think that there's finally hope for actual peace. Iran has been the head of the snake, the instigator, the bully, bringing instability to that region, countless deaths, countless injured people, American and otherwise. And I think once and for all, this is the moment where we deal them a blow they can't recover from. And I just want to say this is against the Iranian regime. It's certainly not the people of Iran. We know that the vast majority of the people of Iran are in agreement with all of us in wanting the shackles of this Islamist regime off of them after 46 years.
Thank you, all three of you, for being here and for being willing to have this conversation. I would like to share, like, also personally for me, you know, my mom had always talked about how one day she would love to take us to Iran and show us where she grew up. And she would say it, but she told us recently that, like us as in her kids, she told us that it wasn't until just recently that she actually believes that that could be a reality. And I think it's so hard to really understand what that even means if you haven't gone through it. But my goal with today's conversation is for people who do want to learn and they are interested in this topic, but they just don't have the context, and not because they don't want to, it's just that they haven't seen it. Because I feel like there's a lot of conversations on the news that go deep on this, but there are sometimes people who want to learn and want to know, but it feels like an overwhelming amount of information. So I'm hoping that our conversation today will help people have some of that context and kind of cover all the angles. All three of you have such unique perspectives on this, and I'm hoping that we can cover some of those angles and help people who are curious and do want to learn have some of the basics and some of the more nuanced conversations that we're going to have today. So Dr. Nazarian, I would love for you, if you were speaking right now, imagine like one-on-one, if I was the person that you're speaking to who doesn't really know that much but wants to learn and they're curious and they don't have strong opinions one way or another about anything. They're just like, I'm open to it, but where do I start? Like, what would you say?
I would take you back to pre-revolutionary Iran. I was born in 1979, the year of the revolution. And I was born in New York on vacation, but returned when I was a month old and grew up in Iran. So pre-revolution, if you look at, our family photo album, it was very European. Iran was very much into food, having a good time. We hear stories from our parents of like 6-day-long events and parties they would have, and they would be in the gardens and how delicious the fruit was. Even to this day, when we have fruit, if it's really good, they're like, it tastes like Iran. So think of a very European, very modern, very educated, kind, generous, accepting, diverse group of people in Iran. You look at the photos, they're wearing high fashion, they're in mini skirts, go-go boots. Yeah, some of the clothes I see in my mom's photos, I'm like, I wish we would have saved that. Like, that's so cool. I wish I would have had that now. So imagine going from that to what we see now. Islamists using women's bodies as a literal symbol of their control over the people. You don't have a choice whether you wear a hijab or not, as we saw with Mahsa Amini, who was wearing a hijab, but 1 inch of her hair was showing, and she was beat up and eventually murdered for that by the morality police. I know people talk about in North Korea that there's a saying that the birds are listening, and it's very similar to that in Iran right now. You don't have freedom to say what you think because you don't know if your next door neighbor is going to report you to the Islamists and what's going to happen to you. Everything is very, you're not free. You're not free like you are here in America to go and protest without consequence. We saw what happened with the, Zan Zandagi Azadi protests, where they raped the young girls and killed them. And why did they rape them? Because if you're a virgin and you die, you go to heaven. So they have to rape you before they kill you to prevent you from going to heaven. This is the mentality of the Islamic Republic. And so why did this happen? I think that that's a very important thing to discuss and very relevant to America actually today. So under the Shah, there was a lot of the same sounds and smells we hear in America, like the word equity. There was a lot of why is the Shah living in a castle while there's homeless people on the street. Sound familiar? And it started on the college campuses as well in Iran. And there's data now and evidence showing that Iran is using the same playbook here in America by funding the campus protests. How did all these campus protesters afford $500 REI tents? Why did all the tents look the same? Because they're being paid for. And it goes back to Iran. And so the Communist Party of Iran joined hands with the mullahs, the Islamists, So the leftists, joined hands with the Islamists. Sound familiar? So that's why you see the Persian Jews, or the Persians in general in America, being so loud, because it wasn't our grandparents that went through this. We went through this, and we're seeing it happen in front of our eyes all over again. Our families were very successful in Iran. We left everything. We escaped on the back of a pickup truck to Pakistan while being shot at by border police. We came here with nothing. We lived in a 3-story marble house in Iran, in Tehran. We left everything behind like that. Came here with nothing to start a life all over again. Imagine at the age of 45, taking your kids, moving to a country you don't speak the language well, you have no money. Imagine the level of threat you must feel. You know, we hear these liberals in America talking about, oh, if Trump gets elected, I'm going to leave this country. Well, you go do that, because you know what? My family actually did that because we were actually afraid for our lives, not virtue signaling like you idiots are. And so, again, I think there's a learned and lived experience that the Persian Jews have here in America, and a specific lens through which we see the world, which we have to share with everybody here in America. Another example of that is core values. Americans have this naive and narcissistic opinion that everybody wants to be like us and everyone shares our core values. And it couldn't be farther from the truth. The Islamic Republic, since preschool, forces kids to chant death to Israel, death to America. Imagine forcing preschoolers to chant death to anything or anybody. Right? They value martyrdom. They value jihad, violence. What do we value here in America? Peace and life. So no, they don't share our core values. They actually have 180-degree opposite core values. So to expect them to be diplomatic and to come to the table in good faith, when you come to the table in good faith, there is a prerequisite of sharing core values. They don't. And so every time I hear here in America from our leadership, not currently, thank God, I feel like we finally have a president who gets it. When I hear from our leadership, oh, this should be done through diplomacy. What diplomacy? The Iranian regime lies. They use diplomacy as a delay tactic to do whatever they want in secret behind your back. So no, there is no diplomacy with a theocracy that their sole goal is to kill as many Americans and Jews as possible so they can go to heaven. They don't share that core value. They don't share the same end goals, and they don't have the same value system. So no, there is no diplomatic relation. There is no negotiation. The only language they understand is force, which is exactly what we saw from America and Israel this past week.
You know, I've heard you share some of this before, and I feel like for someone who hasn't experienced this at all, it just sounds crazy. You know, like you can't imagine the concept of someone valuing death over life, because here it's so ingrained, right? Like I grew up here. It's wild to me. I'm sure for a lot of people. So I think it's really important to have these conversations and share like what the reality is. But I think even if someone wanted to understand, if they heard what you just said right now, it's so foreign. It feels like unbelievable.
It's very foreign to our core values and to how we are raised. Absolutely.
It's foreign to humanity.
Right. I just saw a video yesterday of an 8-year-old boy walking up to the supreme leader in Iran saying, "Please pray for me so that I may become a martyr." An 8-year-old walking up to, imagine an 8-year-old walking up to the President of the United States and saying, "Pray that I may die." It is foreign, but that's what we have to get through the heads of the Americans here, that this is not a level playing field. This is not, we're starting from the same point and let's just meet in the middle. How do you meet in the middle with someone who wants you dead? You can't. You can't. What you can do is protect yourself, protect the future for your children, protect our values, and throw political correctness in the garbage.
And I wanted to say, you said this young 8-year-old who went to the supreme leader and said, but there are the millions and the hundreds of thousands of Iranian children who are praying to be freed from these shackles of the oppression of the Islamic regime right now. There are so many Iranians who are in the diaspora and in Iran also who want the freedom to be freed from this regime and to be freed from this regime.
And it reminds you that every conflict, but in particular for us, this one is a human story. It's not a story of two abstract entities. There are people on both sides of this conflict. We talk about a moment of biblical proportions, and in a way, they say that history repeats itself, but we have to remember that it rhymes before it fully repeats itself. And we find ourselves in a moment when the Jewish state, in partnership with America, which is the world's ultimate backstop of democracy and freedom, is on the precipice potentially of liberating the Iranian people. And if you go back in history, it was an Iranian king, Cyrus, Kurosh in Farsi, who allowed the Jewish people to return to the Holy Land. An Iranian king as a messiah, and now a Jewish state as a force for liberation.
Amen.
It's not a straight line. Every moment in history like this is painful and requires sacrifice. But the story of the Jewish people, the story of Israel, the story of America, liberation is a messy business. And before it's complete, it has to go through all sorts of waves and bumps and ruptures. But if Israel and America are able to be the midwives to a freer, more liberated Iran, we'll all be better for it. You also, in some ways, there's how do I say this best? There's another sort of biblical tie-in where I almost feel like we are living through the second Purim. We have an Iranian hegemon that is planning in great detail and for quite a long time to destroy the Jewish people. And in this story, the sort of savior perhaps is America coming in to finish the job that the Israeli military started in an incredible way that many of us couldn't have seen coming.
I saw it coming.
I'm glad there was one of us. As Sheila said, this is a tragedy that we've gotten here. You have the Iranian government sitting on 10% of the world's oil reserves, and still tens of millions of people are in poverty without access to water and consistent power. And it's because they've invested in all the wrong things for decades at the expense of people.
But when you say they've invested in the wrong things for decades, according to their core values, they've invested in all the right things, because the more Jews and Americans they kill, they go to heaven, and that's the ultimate goal.
It's not mismanagement, it's a choice.
It's a choice.
That's right. Yeah.
I want to ask you though, how are you feeling? Because you have family in both places, how do you feel?
Yeah, it's a very surreal feeling.
Yeah.
And I have a ticket to be in Israel in 10 days, and if the airport is open, I'll be there. But what can you say? You hope that as much good will be done with as little cost. But of course, history tells us that there are costs to these things. I think in this moment, there are a lot of people wondering if we've made the right choices as Americans through our leadership. If we say that we overlearned the lessons of appeasement in World War II, then we also have to acknowledge that there is perhaps an overlearning of the lessons of the Iraq War. And we can all agree that while we shouldn't pursue recklessly using force, I think we've been reminded this week that force has a place in promoting freedom and democracy. And as unfortunate as that is, it's a reality we can't ignore.
I think you have to know your audience. And with certain audiences, diplomacy works. With certain audiences, diplomacy is seen as weakness that is to be exploited. And so this week we will see, and the world will see, what peace through strength means.
What do you think it means?
It means in order to have freedom, freedom isn't free, and it requires constant attention. And I think that in America, because there has been freedom and peace for so long, people have become complacent. And I think that includes American Jews. We see what's happened in K through 12. We see what's happened on college campuses. Over the last 30, 40 years, a slow drip of anti-American sentiment, a slow drip of anti-Semitism. a slow drip of values that we don't want in our children and are not healthy for a healthy America and to the survival of America. And so I think when there's peace, people become complacent, and we have to remind ourselves that no, it requires constant attention. And yes, sometimes force to make sure that bad actors sit down and know their place. And again, we all want to acknowledge the amazing soldiers of Israel and America who have put their sacrifices and their lives on the line for our freedom that we so appreciate, and none of us would have had in Iran right now.
One thing I want to talk about briefly also is the anti-Semitism on college campuses. So you went to Columbia.
Unfortunately.
Same here. I went to Columbia for law school. You went to Stanford for law school and undergrad. And I'm curious for both of you, did you experience anti-Semitism when you were there actually?
Yes, a little bit. So I have been telling them ever since that they have an anti-Semitism problem. I stopped donating to them 13 years ago, and when they send me a donation slip, I write "Protect your Jewish students" in black marker and I send it back. So I've known that there's a problem there. I actually almost minored in Islam there. I took so many Islam classes because I wanted to know why my family had to escape. I wanted to know why they hate us so much. So I've read the Quran. And all of this has been amazing training, I have to tell you, for this moment. Because when they say something, I'm like, have you read your Quran? Or no, actually it says here, here, and here that Israel belongs to the Jews. Let's go back and look at it. And I have to say also, I had a Persian teacher in one of my classes, and when we were reading the Quran, I knew some of the passages, and the translation was not correct. The translations are watered down. So if it says, cut this person's neck, it'll say, silence them. That's not what it says. So I think we have to have a very honest conversation about what Islam is in its raw context, which is what these Islamists, follow. We have to have a very honest, maybe perhaps non-politically correct conversations and not be afraid of the term Islamophobia, which is actually branded by the theologians in Iran. The imams and the mullahs in Iran came up with the word Islamophobia so that we would not be able to speak freely about the religion. Why are we able to criticize Judaism? Actually, in Judaism, we're supposed to criticize Judaism. We're supposed to ask questions. Why are we able to criticize Christianity and the Catholic Church? But why on earth, for some reason, are we not able to speak honestly and critically about Islam? Why? Because slowly it has been dripped, Islamophobia, very intentionally. And the time is now, no. We have to call a spade, and we have to say exactly what the intentions are of these Islamists. Are there peaceful Muslims? Absolutely. Where are their voices? I know maybe a handful. Where are they? Because if people were giving Judaism a bad name, I would be the first to call them out, because that's a reflection on me. And so when we see Islamists giving Islam a bad name, I would like to see the 75% of moderate Muslims speak up and push back. Where are they?
Dr. Nazarian, you just mentioned that there are a few peaceful Muslims that have been speaking up on the topic. So for someone who does want to learn and wants to learn from different perspectives, and this is for all of you as well, but who are some of the voices that you think that someone who wants to learn can learn from?
I think
there's
many. There's Luai, who's a Yemeni. There's another Luai, actually, who I think is a Saudi. There's a lot of women. I actually have a woman pinned to my Instagram reels. She's talking for like 10 minutes about how she grew up to hate Jews and what her process was of educating herself and coming out of that cult mentality. Because when you are told to hate the Jew at the age of 2, at the dinner table, Jews this, Jews that. I have been at dinners with people who didn't know I was Jewish, and the conversation slowly turns into the Jews this, the Jews that. I know the conversations that happen at these dinner tables. And so when you are brainwashed from birth to hate a certain group and to blame them for everything wrong in your life, it's a very difficult process to reverse that. There is the social media manager of Christians United for Israel, Kasim, who grew up in London, and he does the stories of us with PragerU. And he talks about how he grew up in an observant Muslim family in the UK. And he was pretty nice to everybody, but he was taught you're nice to everybody except Jews. He's very open about it. He was actually radicalized, was on a plane to go join ISIS, and opens a book about Israel at the airport and says, you know what, I'm going to change my ticket, I'm going to fly to Israel, and I'm going to see for myself. Long story short, he gets to Israel, everything he was taught negated, he saw for himself, ends up converting to Christianity, joins Christians United for Israel, and is one of the starkest defenders of Israel and the Jewish people now. And he has a picture of himself with a full beard on his way to join ISIS. So can people change? Yes. But how do we change millions and millions and millions of people? It is estimated that 15 to 25% of Muslims worldwide are radicalized. How do we change that many people? And Brigitte Gabriel, who's a Lebanese Christian, who was saved by the IDF minutes before Hezbollah was going to slaughter her and her family. Her family told her when they knock on the door, run through the back, run straight to Israel. And she was like, this is the last time I'm going to see my parents. And minutes before that happened, the IDF busted down her door and saved her family's life. She talks about how Muslims who don't speak up are irrelevant. And it's the same with Jews. Jews, if you're not speaking up, you are irrelevant. So find your voice. Don't just be a Jew that counts. And to all the Muslims out there who are moderate, peace-loving, life-loving, speak up. This is the time. We need you. We need your voices.
So I met Kasim actually at a pro-Israel event, and he showed me that picture. He hasn't posted it anywhere publicly, but he shows it if you have a conversation with him. He's very sweet, and I love that you brought him up because I think he is an incredible voice, an incredible person to learn from. Okay, I want to pause for a second, and I want to see, we've covered a lot of different topics, and we've got into why this is important for you to even have this conversation, some of the realities that might not be clear to someone who grew up in America and doesn't have that context that we might have. Even for me, I never have been to Iran, but having parents who are Iranian, I have some context around it. So I feel like we're covering a few different topics here. Is there anything that we have covered or haven't covered that you guys would like to delve into?
I just want to tell one story. We were at a Shabbat dinner with some of the elders in my husband's in-laws family, and they described that before the state of Israel existed in Iran, when you went to the supermarket as a Jew, you were not able to touch an apple, because if you reached and touched an apple, you made all of the other apples filthy. The word is najas. They said that when it rained, they would beat up the Jews because the rain would hit the Jews' back and hit the ground and made the ground najas. This was before the state of Israel. The elders in the family say after the state of Israel, things changed. The Jews were not powerless anymore. And the way that they were treated was noticeably and starkly different. So all of this anti-Semitism happening right now with the increased levels and the cycle starting back up just gives us more proof why the state of Israel needs to exist and why we must make sure never again is never again. And that's why Israel is there. So with all the crazy, with all the anti-Semitism, it just makes the Jews stronger. It makes our passion for the state of Israel stronger. It brings us together. And when we work together, we are unstoppable. And I think you've witnessed that in the last 9 days.
So we're all here as Persian American Jews, and I think there's a lot of questions from people who are Americans asking, why is this related to America? And although we've touched on it, I really want to go deeper on that. If someone, had family who was in the military that got deployed and went to Iran, it gets really personal and sometimes difficult, even if you have that context of having family in the military, of understanding why are we getting involved? Why is this relevant to us? And I want to have a lot of clarity of what's the answer to that question?
I think that what Americans need to understand is, number one, we already have troops in the Middle East. The other thing they need to understand is that Iran has killed 1,000 Americans. So I was doing Jubilee on YouTube, and it was 25 Republicans versus 25 Democrats, and I was sitting next to an ex-Marine. And he was like, America only, America only. And I was like, that guy in Hezbollah that Israel just took out is responsible for the death of 52 Marines, right? US Marines. He goes, oh yeah, we have to help Israel. We have to help Israel. So I think that the people in America that don't understand what's going on fall into two camps. Those who are educatable and those who are Trump derangement syndrome. So the Trump derangement syndrome camp are literally defending the Islamic Republic right now. Those who claim to be feminists, those who claim to be for women's rights and bodily autonomy and all of this stuff are literally defending the regime that rapes women and kills women, forces them to dress in a certain way, to exert their dominance physically on a woman's body. So the clown world that the Trump derangement syndrome crowd is living in, I give up. Like, if this hasn't woken them up, they're on the side of Hamas, they're on the side of the Islamic Republic. I have no words for you. Now, the side that is educatable, I would let them know, and I think they just need to know, this is the US interests in the Middle East. If there is no Israel, Iran will bully the entire Middle East. There'll be so much instability that is of US interest. We don't want instability all over the world. We want peace, we want commerce, we want opportunity, we want trade. We don't want bombs going off in certain areas of the world where we get oil, where we have interests. There are real American interests in the Middle East, and Israel is a beacon of hope there, which keeps everybody else at bay and from it devolving into a complete mess. So we do have interests in the Middle East. That is America first. Israel is our ally in the Middle East, which helps us keep everything at bay. And being America only makes no sense, okay? We don't live in a vacuum. We all live on planet Earth. And if there's war and war here and war there and bullies like China and North Korea and Russia running amok on the continent next to us, you think it doesn't affect us? Of course it affects us. So I love what President Trump said when he came out. He's like, I came up with the term America first. I came up with the term MAGA, and I'm going to define what it means. And he shut everybody up on the right. And they have just completely embarrassed themselves on the right. Like, I just live for that. Now, I want to send a special message to the Jews on the left. And I want to let you know why Persian Jews are so Republican. It is because we lived through socialism. Why are the Russian Jews Republican? Why are the South American Jews Republican? Because we know where flowery, gorgeous, cutesy words lead, like diversity, equity, and inclusion. We know how the Islamists and the left, when they join hands, what results? You're seeing it on the streets of Iran. And we're seeing the same thing here, and we will not stand for it because my family and myself had to escape my homeland because of what happened to Iran, because of flowery words like equity. And we will not stand for Iran going down, not on our watch.
I want to pause really quick on that topic because you have brought up family a lot, and I think family is important to all of us, obviously, as Persian Jews. So I know that one thing that you've shared is that part of the reason that you speak up on this topic and started speaking up on this topic is because of the future for your own children.
Yes.
I'm assuming that there was an example that was set by your parents, right? It's
No.
not like a... No. So
Not at all.
Let's talk about that. So what was the background that you had from your parents, and then how did that shape what you're...
You have to understand that in Iran, you don't say you're Jewish. You don't hang a menorah on your front gate during Hanukkah. Mm-hmm. You don't put a mezuzah on your door. Many people change their last names to not sound Jewish just to avoid persecution. Mm-hmm. So my family, no, they didn't set an example for me to speak up. If anything, it was the opposite. They were like, so many people have tried to make a difference. What makes you think your voice is going to make a difference? Or if you hang a cardboard cutout of a menorah on your gate during Hanukkah, they'll attack us. I mean, this is the real mentality of my immediate family. So no, I didn't have a role model for standing up and using my voice. What happened is I saw my colleagues in medicine, and I want people to know, in medicine, anti-Semitism is twice as bad as the general public. It's crazy. And these are supposed to be evidence-based, intelligent people. But we've seen what happens in academia these days because we have been complacent and we haven't put our foot down. So I saw my colleagues in medicine using the same words over and over again about Israel and the Jewish people. Blood libel, apartheid, genocide, colonialist state, all of the things that you hear. And this was about 4 years ago during the Sheikh Jarrah conflict. Yeah. And I have a Netflix show, so I had a pretty global audience, and I had about 500,000 followers at that point. And my colleagues who were posting this were about 100,000 followers, 150,000 followers. And I said, you know what? If I don't do it, who's going to do it?
At the height of the Syrian civil war, I was a Mideast analyst at the State Department. And I remember walking to that building every morning to read the new cables we'd received from the region. And all the intelligence showed that every cluster munition, every barrel bomb had the fingerprints of the Iranian regime on it. And so it's not just Israel, it's not just Syria, it's Lebanon and Yemen and all the other places that have bled and suffered because of this regime. So when we talk about what's going on now, it's important to know that the weaker this regime gets, the safer the world is, the safer Americans are, and the safer we all will be.
This is a historic time. I don't think anyone doubts that, but I want to give context to why and what that means. What happened in the last 24 hours. So the United States carried out a major military operation against Iran's nuclear program. It was against the regime and against the nuclear program, not against the people. And I want to talk about that, like what makes this historic, what happened, has anything like this happened in the last 40, 50 years, and what that means for America and for us.
I think that two things happened with this attack by the United States on Iran's nuclear facilities. The first thing is that we took out the immediate threat of a psychopathic, genocidal theocracy, the most dangerous country having the most dangerous weapon. So I think that is the obvious of it all. I think the secondary effect is to all of America's enemies, this is a deterrence. Meaning that Donald Trump is not the last three presidents, well, they'll try to talk it out or kick the can down the road. No, Donald Trump has the courage and the moral clarity to follow through on what he wants. When he says it, he means it. He told Iran, you have 60 days to negotiate. On the 61st day, Israel went in. He said, within 2 weeks, I'm going to do something with these nuclear facilities. And 2 days later, the job was done. So I think two things happened. We have a safer Middle East, a weaker Islamic regime in Iran, and deterrence from all of our enemies.
So, and also as far as we've heard, there have been no casualties from the attack in the last 24 hours from America against Iran.
Yeah, or Israel against Iran. They have both been incredibly strategic and focused on taking out missiles, nuclear programs, and the IRGC leadership. They've even thrown a bomb into one room to kill an IRGC leader, and the entire rest of the building was spared. Now contrast that to what Iran has been doing with throwing ballistic missiles into the most heavily populated cities in Israel, targeting hospitals, targeting civilians. And what I would like to point out is the UN, who was so upset about a parking lot in Gaza of a hospital getting hit, has made no statement. In fact, came out yesterday condemning the Israeli and American attack. They said nothing about civilians being targeted, which is a war crime by Iran, and hospitals being targeted, another war crime by Iran. So my hope actually is that I get 2 Hanukkah presents this week. One is the Islamic regime being taken down once and for all, and 2, the UN goes down with it.
One other question I want to talk to you about that has to go back to understanding the culture is the concept of Aberu. I heard you talking about that on the news recently. I'm not sure if you've been speaking about that consistently, but you did say something about it recently. So can we talk about the cultural aspect of Aberu? Because when I looked into this, right, it just happened, so it's still developing, but when I looked into it, there's some reports that say that Iran is kind of trying to say that nothing happened, and
yes.
So can we talk about that?
Yeah, Iran actually came out with a statement saying, oh, we'd moved all of our nuclear enrichment to another site. It's all safe. Or they'll post propaganda online showing that they took down a B-2 bomber, but the proportions of the bomber to the people around it is like so AI and like not realistic. So the propaganda machine is alive and strong in Iran. And they've obviously cut off any access to outside information to keep their psychological grip on the people trying to hold on to power. But the idea of Aberu means saving face. And what is projected to the world is very important to the Iranian regime. So they want to save face. So they're never going to say, oh yeah, we were hit. Oh, we're badly injured. We give up, surrender, let's negotiate. They're not going to do that. If anything, they're going to Hail Mary. They're going to throw more bombs into Israel. They're going to project any damage that they've caused in Israel. They've shut down the Strait of Hormuz, which is, funny enough, only affects America like 10% and affects China 50%. So I don't know how long that's going to last with China as an ally to Iran. So again, the negotiations that you would have with any other country that shares core values with you is not something that's possible with the Iranian regime. They view negotiation as a delay tactic. And the sooner Americans realize negotiation and diplomacy with this regime is a joke and is a way for them to get more time to recoup and rearm and come at you again, because again, this is their religion. This is their reason for living. I know it's hard for Americans to understand, but again, I don't see the Islamic regime giving up. I don't see them going down easy. If anything, they would go down fighting as a martyr, because that means they go to heaven.
Another question that I wanted to ask you on this specific topic is, you do not hide at all, obviously, that you're conservative, you're pro-Trump, and you're obviously very, very intelligent. I think a lot of people are afraid to change their opinion on something. Like once they associate with something, they don't want to change it. And if they align with a party, or even if they don't align with a party, they think of it as a weakness to change their opinion.
No, they don't see it as a weakness to change their opinion. It's so hard to say you were wrong.
Mm-hmm. Ego?
It's ego.
So, but my question for you is, as someone who does see all the different perspectives, even if you don't agree with it, you're looking at it and you're understanding it and you're taking it in. So
it's called critical thinking skills.
I know, it's really important. But unfortunately, I think most people are not doing that. So as someone who is seeing it from the other perspective, and you understand, even if you don't agree with them, what other people might be thinking, can you make the argument from someone who is not conservative, like how they could still have the same end goal, even if they don't share the same politics?
I've been seeing that, actually. I've been seeing my diehard liberal friends being like, you know, it's pretty amazing what America did. I'm like, it wasn't America, just say Trump. Say it's amazing what Trump did. I know you can do it. Let's go. I'm waiting. But they can't, right? So, you know, I think they're good people. I think they come from a good place. I think that, as most of them are Ashkenazi Jews, I think that the party that their parents supported is not the party that exists today. As we describe the Democratic Party, a lot of ex-Democrats have joined the Conservative Party, and they say, my 2 feet are on the ground. The ground shifted under me. I'm still the same person. And so the other thing I'd like to say that's really helped me understand the other side, Ashkenazi Jews are traumatized by the Holocaust. They're traumatized by the language of nationalism, which they associate with the Republicans, right? Persian, Russian, South American Jews are traumatized by socialism. More death, more destruction, causing us to flee our homelands. So that is the language of the left. So we're traumatized by the language of the left. So I think it's all about trying to see through someone else's lens. And it's about having an honest conversation with yourself and saying, I'm still the same person. I'm still a good person. There's good people on the left and there's good people on the right. But who's doing more for my survival right now? And I think the answer is very clear.
If you had to predict what's going to happen in the next, let's say 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or the next 2 or 3 months, I'm curious what you would think about both of those, like the next 1, 2, 3 weeks and the next 2 or 3 months, what you think is going to happen. From
what I'm hearing from the people in Iran, I think there's certainly a certain faction that is getting ready for a coup, getting ready to overthrow this regime. I think that this opportunity is not going over their heads. I think they understand the time is now. Another faction is very scared. They see bombs coming in, they're scared for their lives. This is echoing the Iran-Iraq war, which I lived through in Iran. I remember the sirens going off. A bomb landed 2 blocks away from our home. I remember going to the windows because we didn't have bomb shelters. I remember going to the windows and watching the bombs come in, and my parents would tell me they were fireworks, 2 a.m., 3 a.m. So I lived through that, and I know that they're scared. So I think once the initial fear subsides and they realize that Israel and America have only targeted IRGC members and they're not against the Iranian people, none of us are. We're rooting for them, as a matter of fact. I think that once that fear goes away, I don't see this regime recovering. They have nothing left. They don't have proxies. They don't have nuclear weapons. They're almost out of their ballistic missile stockpile. They're almost out of their missile launchers. The oil has been hit. I saw the streets of Tehran flooding because an inside job was performed where they flooded the streets. Their economy is in shambles. Their allies are abandoning them. Putin came out and said, there's 2 million Russians living in Israel. I'm not going to attack my own people. China's not doing anything. I see reports that the regime, through their shadow fleet, have been trying to sell off as much oil as possible to fill their pockets. I don't see the regime surviving this. I don't think they're going to go out without a fight, but I do see the Iranian people rising up in this moment. 80% of them don't support this regime. I do see them rising up. I do see the regime falling because, for the reasons I just mentioned, I don't think there's recovery from here.
And it sounds like you also think that they're going to go down partially because of the Aberu concept of like, they're not necessarily going to do things out of the best interest. They're going to do it in a way that they can look as good as you can in a situation where they're losing.
Correct. I think that if they had come to the negotiating table in good faith and not just giving the runaround to Trump, who sees right through it, thank God we finally have a president who sees through it. I think that if they've done that and they would have chosen in their own best interests, then we would have never seen any of this happening, right? But you have to understand these people aren't necessarily driven by the best interests for their own people or for their country. They're driven by Islamist ideology, and they're going to do whatever it is that they think their religion wants them to do in order to be a good Muslim. So again, any normal, sane person put in the same situation would have chosen diplomacy. But again, like I said in the beginning, these people aren't playing by the same fundamental core values. And so they will behave in a way that is very foreign and seemingly not in the best interests of their country or themselves. But that's what it is.
Thank you so much. So, Jonathan, I know that you had something relevant to this that you wanted to share, and we would love to hear it.
Yeah, it's interesting for me because as of yesterday, most Americans associate Esfahan with a now destroyed centrifuge facility. My grandfather was the chief rabbi of Esfahan.
Wow.
And this is him and my grandmother in their garden in Esfahan. I've always wondered what it would be like to go back there to see the synagogue where he created a community. Esfahan is one of the oldest Jewish communities in the world. And I've grown up with this idea of this mythic place that maybe one day will be a place we can visit. For now, I hope that the Iranian people can take fate in their own hands with our help and make a new day. Just to
Cue that song.
maybe that is the soundtrack for our new day that we've woken up to. Just a few weeks after October 7th, I was in Israel and I was walking through some of the kibbutzim that were hardest hit, like Kfar Aza and Be'eri, and I picked up some bullet casings. And the person I was with from the army told me that they were from AK-47 rounds, and that ultimately these were financed or provided by the Islamic regime. So suffice it to say that I won't shed a tear to see this regime fall, and it'll be a safer and better world if it does. If you'd told me after October 7th that within 2 years we would see the end of the Assad regime, we would see a freer Lebanon that is ready to free itself from Iran and from Hezbollah, if you'd told me that Hamas would be on the ropes, if you'd told me that 20 or more leaders of the Islamic regime's military command would be eliminated in one night, I would have told you that you were dreaming. But now we really are on the verge of potentially a newer, more hopeful, more free Middle East. And we will have Israel and the United States of America to thank for it. And I, as an Iranian American Jew, would be very proud for that to be part of our legacy of history.
I just want to say that I'm really grateful that all three of you are speaking up on this topic, because I don't think it's easy, although maybe Dr. Nazarian, you would disagree and you say it would be harder not to speak up on this topic.
Yes.
But I think it's really important that we are, and I think like we all understand what's at stake if you don't speak up. I want to close this out with a final question of what is at stake if someone doesn't speak up and doesn't take the time to educate themselves, whether they're Jewish or not. I think there's a reason why we're here right now and we're taking time for this. There's a lot of different things that anybody could be doing at this time, but all of us are putting a lot of energy and thought into this in different ways. And I wanna address that, like what's at stake if we don't speak up, and what's at stake if we don't, especially for people who don't feel like they have a lot of information but are not putting in the effort to like figure out what's going on and learn about it. I'd be curious what you guys think about that.
I mean, for me, I started speaking up because I went into survival mode. For me, I knew that if America goes down, Israel's going to go down, and then where do we go? There's nowhere that's going to be safe for the Jews. And I love America so much. They took us in when our mother country rejected us and wanted to do harm to us. And so I felt like it was my obligation to speak up, because my parents didn't risk everything to be in a country where freedom of speech is valued, and I should shut up in this country. I felt like that was disrespectful to their sacrifice, number one. Number two, to those that are afraid to speak up, there's 18-year-olds going into Gaza right now to defend their country. They should be afraid, and they're not. They're showing immense courage. So you are afraid to just use your words? I'm sorry, I have no sympathy for you. And number three, there's never going to be a better chance for us than now. We see kids on college campuses are 50-50 on the Israel-Hamas side. That means 50% of 20-year-olds think Hamas is right in this conflict. So those, in 20 years, where do you think those 20-year-olds are going to be? They're going to be in leadership, they're going to be in politics, they're going to be in your hospitals, they're going to be lawyers. And so while 75 to 80% of Americans support Israel, our best shot is now. If we don't speak up now, imagine how much more difficult it will be for our kids to speak up. So for me, there was an urgency, there was survival mode, and there was an acknowledgement of what real courage is versus me just using my voice. And I was scared. I had anxiety for the first time in my life. I was scared. I'm armed all the time. And that is just the reality of speaking up, but I don't regret it. It was the best thing I ever did. I have attracted such purpose and meaning and amazing people into my life. And they say God rewards the authentic, and I really believe that to be true. So if I had to do it all over again, I would absolutely do it all over again, and I encourage everyone to do the same.
I would love to ask you specifically about your mom and the impact she's had on you and how it relates to all of this.
My mom?
Your mom.
So my mom passed away when I was 16. So I think that, again, I mentioned earlier that I've been through certain things in my life that have made me uniquely prepared for this moment. And I think that, you know, having gone through escaping Iran, experiencing anti-Semitism, you know, having, you know, my mom pass away, I've been through harder things, a surgical residency at the county hospital here in Los Angeles. I've definitely been through harder things. So for me, when someone says, you know, sends a pig's hoof to my office or, you know, sends death threats online, again, I'm not as shaken as certain people are. And you would ask the question, what do you say to people who don't want to speak up? I fully acknowledge that there are people that don't have the emotional bandwidth to speak up because it's not easy. I think it's worth it. I think there's amazing rewards on the other side, but you have to get past that scary. You have to get past that sort of like moment where you feel alone and you feel attacked. And again, I think my mom always gave me a lot of positive reinforcement. You know, I came to this country when I was 7. I didn't know how to dress. I didn't speak the language. I was not cool by any definition of the word. And it was, a culture shock, and it took a lot of adapting. And I don't think I really found who I was until I reached college 10 years later. And maybe that was also uniquely preparing me as well, in that I can stand alone. I can be alone. I don't need positive reinforcement from other people in order to know who I am and to stand firm in my core values. And so to all those people that may not speak up or may not, be as outspoken as some of us, just make yourself 10% uncomfortable. Live in that 10% uncomfortable for a while until it becomes comfortable, and then push yourself another 10%, because that's how I did it. I was a Persian Jewish girl. I was wanting to be told what a good girl I am and to be patted on the head and to just fit in and not rock the boat, believe it or not. But slowly you move, push yourself a little bit, push yourself a little bit more, push yourself a little bit more. And one day you wake up and you're like, I'm going to say what I think. And if people like it, they like it. And if they don't like me, they don't like me. I'm not here to have everyone like me. If I'm doing that, then I'm actually not being true to myself. If you're walking a constant tightrope, it's so funny. I know people that, when the whole Black Lives Matter thing was happening, I was the one saying, these people have anti-Semitism in their charter. Don't give money to them. You can't claim to be bigoted against and be bigoted against another group of people. You can't say racism and then be racist towards Jews. It's not how this works. And so during that time, people called me racist and, all of these names, but I called it out. And then when October 7th happened, what did Black Lives Matter do? They put a picture of a paratrooper with a Palestinian flag coming over it that killed people at the Nova and raped people and cut off women's breasts at the Nova Festival. That's what they put as their logo on social media. And then all of a sudden, everybody woke up. There were signs, but no, you were such a virtue signaler. You were so obsessed with having people like you that you actually advocated for groups that are calling for your unaliving. So again, don't try to be accepted by everyone. Don't walk a tightrope. Live in your core values, because culture will shift. If you weren't living and saying the things that you actually believe, when culture shifts, they're going to look back at your tweets and they're going to say, you said this. But if you're constantly living in your core values and being honest and being a critical thinker, you will never regret anything that you said in the past, because you weren't doing it. You weren't saying it to please other people because it was cool at the moment. Trust yourself.
I think that there's something about losing a loved one at a young age that forces you to realize, we're not going to be here forever. If you want to do something,
absolutely.
And it's such a cliche thought, but at the same time, for me, when I hear you speak or share your story or speak, it is something I've wondered a lot, how the loss of your mom at 16, that's so young and that's so hard, and you're already in a new country at a young age.
Yeah.
I've always been curious how that impacted your decision to want to speak up.
No, I think when you do lose a parent at a young age, I think you do burn the candle at both ends. You realize time is short and I have a limited amount of time to get things accomplished that I want to accomplish. And I can't say that was not a major driving factor in my life.
I just wanted to thank the three of you for being here today. Less than 24 hours that we got the news, and we're already having this conversation on what it means. And I hope that we get to continue to have these conversations, and maybe next time in Iran, we'll get to all be there and visit with the safety of the American, Iranian, and Israeli people.